The Battle of North Anna was fought May 23–26, 1864, as part of Union Lt. Gen. Ulysses S. Grant's overland campaign against Confederate Gen. Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. It consisted of a series of small actions near the North Anna River in central Virginia, rather than a general engagement between the armies. The individual actions are sometimes separately known as Telegraph Road Bridge and Jericho Mills, Oxford, Quarles Mill, and Hanover Junction. After disengaging from the stalemate at Spotsylvania Courthouse, Grant moved his army to the southeast, hoping to lure Lee into battle on open ground. He lost the race to Lee's next defensive position south of the North Anna River, but Lee was unsure of Grant's intention and initially prepared no significant defensive works. On May 23, the Union 5th Corps under Maj. Gen. Governor K. Warren forded the river at Jericho Mills, and a Confederate division from the Corps of Lt. Gen. A.P. Hill was unable to dislodge its beachhead. The 2nd Corps under Maj. Gen. Winfield S. Hancock stormed a small Confederate force at Hennigan's Redoubt to seize the Chesterfield Bridge crossing on the Telegraph Road, but did not advance further south across the river. That night, Lee and his engineers devised a masterful scheme for defensive earthworks in the shape of an inverted V that could split the Union Army when it advanced and allow the Confederates to use interior lines to attack and defeat one wing, preventing the other wing from reinforcing it in time. Grant initially fell into this trap, as Hancock's men failed to carry the Confederate works on the eastern leg of the V. On May 24, a brigade under the drunken Brig. Gen. James H. Ledlier was repulsed from an ill-conceived assault against a strong position at Oxford, the apex of the V. After 2 days of skirmishing in which the armies stared at each other from their earthworks, the inconclusive battle ended when Grant ordered another wide movement to the southeast, in the direction of the crossroads at Cold Harbor. Background: Grant's overland campaign was one of a series of simultaneous offensives the newly appointed General-in-Chief launched against the Confederacy. By late May 1864, only 2 of these continued to advance. Maj. Gen. William T. Sherman's Atlanta Campaign and the Overland Campaign, in which Grant accompanied and directly supervised the Army of the Potomac and its commander, Maj. Gen. George G. Meade. Grant's campaign objective was not the Confederate capital of Richmond, but the destruction of Lee's army. President Abraham Lincoln had long advocated this strategy for his generals, recognizing that the city would certainly fall after the loss of its principal defensive army. Grant ordered Meade, "Wherever Lee goes, there you will go also." Although he hoped for a quick, decisive battle, Grant was prepared to fight a war of attrition. Both Union and Confederate casualties could be high, but the Union had greater resources to replace lost soldiers and equipment. On May 5, after Grant's army crossed the Rapidan River and entered the wilderness of Spotsylvania, it was attacked by Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Although Lee was outnumbered, about 60,000 to 100,000, his men fought fiercely and the dense foliage provided a terrain advantage. After 2 days of fighting and almost 29,000 casualties, the results were inconclusive and neither army was able to obtain an advantage. Lee had stopped Grant, but had not turned him back. Grant had not destroyed Lee's army. Under similar circumstances, previous Union commanders had chosen to withdraw behind the Rappahannock, but Grant instead ordered Meade to move around Lee's right flank and seize the important crossroads at Spotsylvania Courthouse to the southeast, hoping that by interposing his army between Lee and Richmond, he could lure the Confederates into another battle on a more favorable field. Elements of Lee's army beat the Union army to the critical crossroads of Spotsylvania Courthouse and began entrenching. Meade was dissatisfied with Maj. Gen. Philip Sheridan's Union cavalry's performance and released it from its reconnaissance and screening duties for the main body of the army to pursue and defeat the Confederate cavalry under Marge. Gen. J.E.B. Stuart. Sheridan's men mortally wounded Stuart in the tactically inconclusive Battle of Yellow Tavern and then continued their raid toward Richmond, leaving Grant and Meade without the eyes and ears of their cavalry. Near Spotsylvania Courthouse, fighting occurred on and off from May 8 through May 21, as Grant tried various schemes to break the Confederate line. On May 8, Union Marge. Gens. Governor K. Warren and John Sedgwick unsuccessfully attempted to dislodge the Confederates under Marge. Gen. Richard H. Anderson from Laurel Hill, a position that was blocking them from Spotsylvania Courthouse. On May 10, Grant ordered attacks across the Confederate line of earthworks, which by now extended over 4 miles, including a prominent salient known as the Muleshoe. Although the Union troops failed again at Laurel Hill, an innovative assault attempt by Col. Emory Upton against the Muleshoe showed promise. Grant used Upton's assault technique on a much larger scale on May 12 when he ordered the 15,000 men of Marge. Gen. Winfield S. Hancock's Corps to assault the Muleshoe. Hancock was initially successful, but the Confederate leadership rallied and repulsed his incursion. Attacks by Marge. Gen. Horatio G. Wright on the western edge of the Muleshoe, which became known as the Bloody Angle, involved almost 24 hours of desperate hand-to-hand fighting, some of the most intense of the Civil War, supporting attacks by Warren and by Marge. Gen. Ambrose Burnside were unsuccessful. Grant repositioned his lines in another attempt to engage Lee under more favorable conditions and launched a final attack by Hancock on May 18, which made no progress. A reconnaissance in force by Confederate Lt. Gen. Richard S. Ewell at Harris Farm on May 19 was a costly and pointless failure. In the end, the battle was tactically inconclusive, but with almost 32,000 casualties on both sides, it was the costliest battle of the campaign. Grant planned to end the stalemate by once again shifting around Lee's right flank to the southeast, toward Richmond. Opposing forces. Grant's Union forces totaled approximately 68,000 men, depleted from the start of the campaign by battle losses, illnesses, and expired enlistments. They consisted of the Army of the Potomac, under Marge. Gen. George G. Meade, and the Ninth Corps. The 5 Corps were: 2nd Corps, under Marge. Gen. Winfield S. Hancock, including the divisions of Marge. Gen. David B. Birney and Brig. Gens. Francis C. Barlow, John Gibbon, and Robert O. Tyler. 5th Corps, under Marge. Gen. Governor K. Warren, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Charles Griffin, Samuel W. Crawford, and Lysander Cutler. 6th Corps, under Brig. Gen. Horatio G. Wright, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. David A. Russell, Thomas H. Neal, and James B. Ricketts. 9th Corps, under Marge. Gen. Ambrose Burnside, including the divisions of Marge. Gen. Thomas L. Crittenden and Brig. Gens. Robert B. Potter, Orlando B. Wilcox, and Edward Ferrero. Cavalry Corps, under Marge. Gen. Philip H. Sheridan, including the divisions of Brig. Gens. Alfred T. A. Talbot, David M.C.M. Gregg, and James H. Wilson. Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia comprised about 53,000 men and was organized into 4 corps. 1st Corps, under Marge. Gen. Richard H. Anderson, including the divisions of Marge. Gens. Charles W. Field and George E. Pickett, and Brig. Gen. Joseph B. Kershaw. 2nd Corps, under Lt. Gen. Richard S. Ewell, including the divisions of Marge. Gens. Jubilee, Early and Robert E. Rhodes. 3rd Corps, under Lt. Gen. A. P. Hill, including the divisions of Marge. Gens. Henry Heth, John C. Breckinridge, and Cadmus M. Wilcox, and Brig. Gen. William Mahone. Cavalry Corps, without her commander following the mortal wounding of Maj. Gen. J.E.B. Stewart on May 11, including the divisions of Maj. Gens. Wade Hampton, Fitzhugh Lee, and W.H.F. Rooney Lee. For the first time in the campaign, Lee received sizable reinforcements, including 3 of the 4 brigades in Maj. Gen. George E. Pickett's division from the James River defense against the ineffective Maj. Gen. Benjamin Butler and 2 brigades of Maj. Gen. John C. Breckinridge's command from the Shenandoah Valley. Pickett's men arrived May 21 to 23. Breckinridge was assigned temporarily to Lee beginning May 20 at Hanover Junction. May 21 to 23. Maneuvers to the North Anna. Grant's objective following Spotsylvania was the North Anna River, about 25 miles south, and the important railroad intersection just south of it, Hanover Junction. By seizing both of these, Grant could not only interrupt Lee's supply line, he could deny the Confederates their next logical defensive line, forcing them to attack his army in the open, under more favorable terms. Grant knew that Lee could probably beat him in a straight race to the North Anna, so he devised a stratagem that might be a successful alternative. He designated Hancock's Second Corps to head southeast from Spotsylvania to Milford Station, hoping that Lee would take the bait and attack this isolated corps. If he did, Grant would attack him with his 3 remaining corps. If he did not, Grant would have lost nothing and his advance element might reach the North Anna before Lee could. Hancock's corps of 20,000 men started marching the night of May 2021, screened by 3 regiments of Union cavalry under Brig. Gen. Alfred T. A. Talbot, who skirmished with their Confederate counterparts led by Brig. Gen. John R. Chambliss. By dawn on May 21 they reached Guinea Station, where a number of the Union soldiers visited the Chandler House, the site of Stonewall Jackson's death a year earlier. The Union cavalry, riding out ahead, encountered 500 soldiers from Maj. Gen. George E. Pickett's division, which was marching north from Richmond to join Lee's army. After a brief skirmish, the Confederates withdrew across the Mattapona River to the west of Milford Station, but the 11th Virginia Infantry did not receive the order and was forced to surrender. Hancock had expected to encounter soldiers from Lee's main army, so he was surprised to find Pickett's men at Milford Station, from which he inferred correctly that Lee was being reinforced. Rather than risk his corps in a fight in an isolated location, he decided to terminate his maneuver. By the afternoon of May 21, Lee was still in the dark about Grant's intentions and was reluctant to disengage prematurely from the Spotsylvania courthouse line. He cautiously extended Ewell's corps to the Telegraph Road. He also notified Maj. Gen. John C. Breckinridge, who had just defeated a small Union army in the Shenandoah Valley and was en route to join Lee, to stop at Hanover Junction and defend the North Anna River line until Lee could join him. Meanwhile, Grant started the rest of his corps on their marches. As Warren's Fifth Corps began marching toward Massaponax Church, Grant received intelligence about Ewell's corps blocking the Telegraph Road and changed Warren's orders to proceed instead to Guinea Station and follow Hancock's corps. Burnside's Ninth Corps encountered Ewell's men on the Telegraph Road and Burnside ordered them to turn around and proceed to Guinea Station. Wright's Sixth Corps then followed Burnside. By this time, Lee had a clear picture of Grant's plan and he ordered Ewell to march south on the Telegraph Road, followed by Anderson's corps, and A.P. Hill's corps on parallel roads to the west. Lee's orders were not urgent. He knew that Ewell had 25 miles to march over relatively good roads, versus Hancock's 34 miles over inferior roads. May 21 was a day of missed opportunities for Grant. Lee failed to take the bait of the isolated Second Corps and instead marched by the most direct route to the North Anna. That night, Warren's Fifth Corps bivouacked a mile east of the Telegraph Road and somehow managed to miss Lee's army marching south right next to it. If Warren had attacked Lee's flank, he could have inflicted significant damage to the Confederate army. Instead, Lee's army reached the North Anna unmolested on May 22. Grant realized that Lee had beaten him to his objective and decided to give his exhausted men an easier day on the march, following Lee down the Telegraph Road for only a few miles before resting for the night.